Good morning. Welcome to the Heritage Foundation and our Douglas and Sarah Allison Auditorium. We, of course, welcome those who are joining us on C-SPAN and some other television networks, as well as those who are joining us on the heritage.org website. Would ask everyone here in-house to make that last check that cell phones have been turned off as a courtesy. And, of course, we will take Internet questions at any time, simply emailing us at speaker@heritage.org. And we will post the program on the Heritage homepage for everyone's future reference as well. Hosting our guest today and welcoming her to the Heritage Foundation is the Executive Vice President of the Heritage Foundation, Phil Trueluck. Mr. Trueluck.
Thank you, John. Thanks, John. I've learned not to even bring my cell phone anymore because I always leave it on. We're delighted to have you all here today. Appreciate you joining us. Hope we'll get out of here before the rain starts and you don't have too much trouble leaving. But we are delighted you're here for this very special session we have today. In Boston Harbor in 1773, a bunch of patriots got angry about taxes imposed by distant politicians, and they threw tea overboard. Move ahead in 2010, a bunch of patriots got angry about taxes imposed by distant politicians and threw the politicians overboard. Now, those men and women who took up the Tea Party mantle achieved more electorally and legislatively than the grassroots movements such as the Occupy Wall Street, which received far more pandering from the elites. Well, the Tea Party's principles were simple: tax less, spend less, and get the government out of our homes and businesses. Their roots, however, lay in extensive intellectual history in the American founding. Behind that snake on Gladstone's flag is a deeper message than just "don't tread on me." It is, in fact, a bold philosophical statement. Liberty is of more fundamental importance to human dignity than paternalism, and a government which sacrifices the former for the latter tramples upon the rights of its citizens. Well, few have exemplified this ideal more than our speaker today. She has represented Minnesota's 6th District for almost 8 years now, and importantly for this session, she is the founding member of the Tea Party, the House Tea Party Caucus, which has remained, and she has remained, a strong force for keeping conservatives true to their principles in Congress. And I believe she ran for president one time, a couple of years ago. Although she will soon leave Washington, and we're going to dearly miss her, I can assure you that. And she's going to return to the real world. Maybe she'll tell us a little bit about what she's going to do. But she will always remain a shining light of the Tea Party movement and a testament to what good people can achieve when they get fighting mad. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Representative Michele Bachmann.
Thank you. Phil, thank you so much for that warm introduction. That is the question that everyone is asking me right now. Michele, what are you going to do when you leave Congress after 8 years here? And I tell them that, number one, I'm going to have a very long, extended vacation. You get really tired when you're here. And so I've chosen the perfect site for the most secluded place I could find. It's MSNBC primetime. Actually, that's a lie. So anyway, I do want to thank you, though, for that introduction. It is an honor for me to be here, and I can't think of anywhere I would rather be to give one of my final speeches while I'm an official member of the United States Congress than truly the gold standard for conservative thought, and that's the Heritage Foundation. It's a thrill to be able to be here. This is a stellar organization. I'm thrilled to be here, as is AEI and Cato and American and the Family Research Center, as well as Eagle Forum, as well as Concerned Women for America. This city is filled with terrific organizations that have stood long and hard and valiantly have fought for American principles and American exceptionalism. And for 40 years, Heritage has been at the top of the heap. And in many ways, I believe that, as you said, Phil, that the American values and principles that Heritage has espoused for these years has provided the framework for the Tea Party. It's limited government. It is strong families. It's free enterprise. There's nothing new here. But just because it's not new doesn't mean it isn't profound. These aren't new ideas. They're the same values that have been espoused since the time of the American Revolution. But what is different is that it was time for us. We were in desperate need of a reawakening, and that's what the Tea Party was all about, republishing the American values of American greatness. All the media wanted to talk about was whether the Tea Party was up or down, whether it was dead or alive. But that missed the point entirely, because the Tea Party never was, never has been, never will be a political party. Because you see, it's a movement. It's a movement about returning us and our nation to our founding principles, front and center, by contending for them in public discourse. And when, as you said, the Patriots threw tea into the Boston Harbor, they weren't just protesting an unfair tax. I'm a former federal tax lawyer. I hate high taxes. That isn't just what the Boston Tea Party was about. It was also about cementing the soul of our nation. And the soul is this: opposition to an overreaching government and a fierce passion for self-determination. And it's the idea of the Declaration of Independence that infuses really the meaning and being of what it is to be an American. And it's this: it's the idea that there is a creator, and we acknowledge that in the Declaration, that a creator created all of us and created us equal. That in itself is profound. As the Declaration of Independence says, it isn't a government, it isn't a politician that gives any of us our rights. We were given those rights by virtue of birth, by the fact that a creator created us and gave us these rights. They're inalienable, which means no politician, no government takes them away, because only a creator can give them to us. It's a phenomenal philosophy upon which the nation was founded. Those three inalienable rights that the founders enumerated were these: the inalienable right to life. Only a creator can give it, and only a creator can take it away. The second was liberty, freedom, the franchise that was intended for every human on the face of this earth. Every human doesn't enjoy it, but that's what makes this government exceptional, because we recognize that freedom is yours, not something government can give, and certainly something government should never take away. The third is the pursuit of happiness. And that isn't just wanton hedonism. What it means is quite profoundly, you have the right to earn and keep the fruits of your own labor. What a concept! Life, liberty, and the right to earn and keep what it is that you earn. They aren't just nice-sounding words. What I say to you is this: our founders gave us the ultimate social compact, that governments were instituted among men's for one reason: just to secure the inalienable rights that were given to us by a creator. So government can't interfere with them, and certainly government can't take those fundamental rights away from us. And that's what makes us an exceptional nation. And as Phil said, the modern Tea Party stands for three very basic things. Number one, we are taxed enough already. Number two, government should not spend more money than what it takes in. And number three, government should live under the Constitution. Pretty extreme, right? Pretty radical, right? Last night, our Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, said that the Tea Party is crazy and that the Tea Party lacks judgment. Well, that's rich, because if these are the principles that we stand for, I think that whether you're Democrat or whether you're Republican, they're ones that you would agree with, that this is what brings for American greatness. If these ideas are extreme, then that's all we need to know about the challenges in the arena of ideas. On each of these three, unfortunately, our current president has a failing grade. Every step of the way, he's pushed for government that would have a more intrusive role in all of our lives. And the president telegraphed his intentions during his very first inaugural address when he said it's time to, quote, begin again the work of remaking America. He went on to say that we should no longer be asking the question whether government is too small or too big. Instead, he offered we should simply pursue government to get the job done. Well, Mr. President, the job isn't getting done for the American people, and I think we know that all too well. Of course, some of us realize that the question of whether government has the right to do something is far more important than the question of if government has the ability to do something. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that government is a charity. There's nothing that says that government is meant to be our family. It's not meant to be the church. The Constitution is clear. And certainly government should never be our doctor's office. Though the president wants it to be all of the above, including our banker, our student loan officer, and even our car dealer. Placing government at the epicenter of our lives changes the game of the social compact. You see, political liberty and economic liberty are imperiled. They're entwined. They're woven together by our Creator who provides them both to us. You don't get political liberty without economic liberty, and you don't get economic liberty without political liberty. History teaches us that people are most productive, they're most happy, they're most successful when they're free and when they can be independent. If you restrain freedom, if you sap a person's independence, then you'll lose that vital spark of liberty that's made our country so great. To be fair, the love affair with big government did occur under the Bush administration. It occurred long before that, hearkening back to the days of FDR and LBJ. You can even go back to the time of give me liberty, give me death, Patrick Henry. He was worried about big government. But President Obama took the mistakes of his predecessors, unfortunately, and hit the accelerator with a quantum leap of unimaginable proportions. It began when I was here with the Wall Street bailout. I was a freshman member of the United States Congress. It was one of my first major votes. I was sitting as a member of the Financial Services Committee, and I was in the midst of this very consequential debate. As you recall, this was a blank check for a $700 billion bailout. It had never been seen and never been heard of before in the United States history. Sent over from the White House was Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson. He came to our Republican conference to sell us on the bailout, and I confronted him at the microphone with a few very important questions, none of which received an answer. One of my questions was, where does the number $700 billion come from? The second one was, what will you use it for? Since we couldn't get a straight answer to either of those fundamental questions, not only did I vote against him, we put together a great ad hoc group of both Democrats and Republicans who came together and said, maybe this isn't a great idea for giving the Treasury Secretary a blank check for $700 billion. The first vote failed. You could have heard a pin drop in the chamber that day when the vote came up. Nancy Pelosi thought she had the vote in the bag. She didn't. 4 days later, I voted no again. But enough arms had been twisted, you could hear bones breaking from here to San Francisco, and the vote got rammed through. That $700 billion bailout laid the predicate for bailout mania here in Washington, D.C. The next time was for the automobile industry, and once again the taxpayers were on the hook to bail out private companies to the tune of billions of dollars and upend 150 years of settled bankruptcy law and protections for investors. Worse, the government gave pink slips to 3,400 privately held automobile dealerships. This was shameful in our history. Many were ordered to close their doors within 30 days. Imagine that. You own a private business and the government sends you a pink slip, shuts your doors because we tell you to. You have $300,000 worth of spare parts and inventory in your back office, and you're told, tough bounce, we're telling you close your door. Unconscionable. Next came the $1 trillion stimulus package. If you were a politically connected ally of the Obama administration, you got a leg up. So-called green energy companies like Cylinder received hundreds of millions of dollars before they went bankrupt. It was cronyism at its worst. The Department of Energy became the epicenter of loans to Obama donors. And then there was Obamacare, the crown jewel of socialism. It amounted to a government takeover of 1/6 of our economy. And look how that's turned out. Politically connected allies, one after another, got a waiver to Obamacare. False promises like you could keep your health care plan if you like it, or you can keep your doctor if you like him or her, or you'll save $2,500 annually on your health care premium. Well, it's not so funny for the American people that have to live with this abysmal health care system. $2 billion were spent on a dysfunctional website. That wasn't funny. And that doesn't include all the money that was wasted on state websites either. And now, conveniently, the government won't reveal insurance costs for next year until after the midterm election is over. The American people watched all this unfold, and fed up, the modern Tea Party was born as a positive turn of the pendulum. I founded the Tea Party Caucus in Congress just so everyday real Americans could have a voice and a way to share their concerns with their elected representatives. More than anything, it proved to be a listening caucus to get the pulse of real people who live outside the Beltway bubble. This was pretty refreshing for Washington, D.C. Americans of all backgrounds organized rallies. They went to town hall meetings. They showed up here at the U.S. Capitol. It was a spontaneous, organic uprising. So, of course, the left called it AstroTurf. It couldn't possibly be real people would actually stand up and say they want to be able to have self-determination. A rally to stop Obamacare that I called produced tens of thousands of Americans showing up here at the Capitol. They had less than 1 week's notice, no organization, no one paid them to come, and they came here simply to beseech their legislators, not with my health care, you don't. One woman from Hawaii came. She told me that she saw me make the call on a television show. It was Sean Hannity's show on a Friday night. She said, I went to my phone, I ordered a plane ticket on the spot so that I could be there with you the following noon, Thursday at the Capitol. People came from Alaska, all 50 states, over 20,000 people, doctors, lawyers, people from all walks of life saying the country cannot embrace socialized medicine. Well, the grassroots energy sent a wave of freedom-loving reinforcements to Washington, D.C. in 2010, including the likes of Senators Mike Lee and Rand Paul. And it took the gavel away from Nancy Pelosi in the House of Representatives, and with the largest number of seat pickups since 1948, I wonder what this election this year will yield. Even the establishment moved toward embracing the Tea Party's messaging about constitutional principles like national debt and balanced budgets. You know you're effective when Tea Party organizations were systematically targeted by the IRS, which tried to diminish their voice in 2012. The IRS admitted they wrongly asked conservative and faith-based groups for their donor lists, for their membership lists, even for the content of the prayers of people who were in Tea Party organization meetings, all to intimidate and all to slow down applications for tax-exempt status before the crucial 2012 election. Ironically, President Obama himself once made the case for less government intervention in the marketplace. Yes, he did. During a town hall meeting in New Hampshire in 2009, President Obama said, quote, I mean, if you think about it, UPS and FedEx are doing just fine, right? No, they are. It's the post office that's always having problems. A rare moment of clear thinking from our president. Oh, if only his actions had followed suit. But I also bring up that quote because it illustrates the choice that's facing us in just a few weeks. On one side, you have President Obama, our post office president. Bigger government and more spending is the solution to every problem that comes along. If a better model exists, the answer is not change the models, but spend more money to prop up the old model. On the other side, you have a philosophy that believes in maximizing your choices, not forcing you to choose the government pre-selected choice. It encourages entrepreneurs to create new models and let the free market decide whether or not your idea will succeed. Earlier this year, I had the privilege of traveling to England to speak at the Oxford Union, both about innovation and about the bureaucracies that stifle innovation. In that speech, I told the story of a great American. His name is Norman Borlaug, a PhD biologist from the University of Minnesota. Borlaug is in a very unique class. He's one of only 3 Americans to win the Nobel Peace Prize, the Congressional Gold Medal, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Those distinctions go to luminaries like Martin Luther King Jr. and like Elie Wiesel, and also Borlaug, an Iowan Minnesotan. As an Iowan Minnesotan myself, I'm pretty proud of Norman Borlaug. Borlaug's story is worth studying in depth for everyone because it illustrates why human capital and human creativity as an innovating force has to be nurtured, it has to be defended, and it has to be allowed to thrive. The short version is this. Borlaug's research led to thousands and thousands and thousands of failures. Failure upon failure upon failure, year upon year of failure, of trials in his research. But ultimately, it led to a strain of wheat that was able to succeed in 2 very different environments. And as a result, Borlaug's wheat was hardier, more resilient, tougher than any variety of wheat that had ever been produced before. And today, Norman Borlaug is credited with literally saving the lives of over 1 billion people across the world. Who can say that? That because of what they did, over 1 billion people live today? He's remarkable, Norman Borlaug. How fortunate it was that Borlaug had the freedom that he needed to test his ideas, that he didn't have to go to some bureaucracy every time he needed to get approval for each of the 6,000 varieties of wheat he bred. That when he saw an opportunity that no one else saw, that none of the experts could dictate to him where he could or could not plant those seeds or how he needed to do his work. Borlaug himself saw these bureaucratic threats to innovation. More than 40 years ago, this is what Norman Borlaug said, quote, "One of the greatest threats to mankind today is that the world may be choked by an explosively pervading but well-camouflaged bureaucracy. This urge to control progress from the top down is exactly what stifles innovation. It freezes the dynamic process of trial and error. It privileges the status quo over the new. It embraces the powerful over those who are powerless. It embraces and lifts up the rich over those who are poor. And it helps the big at the expense of the small. You see, centralized control discourages the thousands and thousands of tinkerers across this country and the small businesses who individually and together move our great America forward. We see this as Uber revolutionizes the transportation industry. But instead of trying to make your company more competitive, the taxi industry has been calling on lobbyists and very powerful friends in government to impose even more regulations on the upstart ride-sharing service. We see this out in California, where even education bureaucrats are trying to forcibly shut down and levy fines against computer software learn-to-code boot camps. Their offense? These new and exciting approaches to learning don't fit inside government's preconceived box. We see this in the medical technology industry, where the FDA is stepping in to regulate one of the most innovative markets in the world. We could spend an hour just talking about all of the developments that are going to change our lives in the next 5 years in the realm of healthcare. Just exactly when we don't need government to put a net over innovation, we see explosions in greatness in the medical industry. The FDA is stepping in to regulate one of the most innovative markets in the world, particularly when it comes to mobile apps that would allow each one of us more personalization and more control of our health care. Imagine if you have a disease, your prescription drug could be designed exactly to fit your DNA. Not just a one-size-fits-all penicillin, but a penicillin that is designed for you to get you healed. All these regulations caused Google CEO Sergey Brin to recently say, and I quote, "Health is just so heavily regulated. It's just a painful business to be in." But it isn't just government. There's never a shortage of big companies who'd like their counterparts in government to fix the regulatory environment to advance their particular business interests or protect themselves artificially against their competition. Crony capitalism. That's what corrupt nations do. That's not what America does. It's no coincidence that the greatest explosion of industrial innovation in history accompanied our very first experiments with political liberty and free enterprise. It's because only freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of association, scientific freedom, and certainly economic freedom allow us the freedom of experimentation, the debate, and the chance for risk takers like the great Norman Borlaug to start and, yes, fail time and time again. It's in the use, as the great economist F.A. Hayek once said, of the particular knowledge of time and place that innovation demands. It's the genius of an idea that no one else sees. The environment of freedom has caused the greatest leap ever in our human well-being, not just for America. Our ideas and innovations here are seen almost immediately and replicated even in third world and developing nations. You can go to the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, Haiti, and you'll see cell phones by impoverished people all across the world because impoverished people want a leg up too. You see, trickle-down does work. When you have innovation, when you have growth, when you have new wealth that's created, it's those at the bottom of the economic ladder who have the most to gain. Because the environment of freedom has created the greatest leap ever in human well-being, improving our lives by an order of magnitude. It represents the opportunity to thrive, regardless of age or race or gender. The recipe for success is simple. Encourage work. Don't discourage it. That's what England recently found. Embrace human creativity and human capital. Don't limit it. Expand freedom for people to follow their dreams. Don't stop people from the benefit of failure, because those who overcome failure ultimately learn how to succeed. And here's just one example. I'm a former federal tax lawyer, and I know firsthand that our tax code has become too complex, too unfair, and blatantly a tool for political cronyism and control. That's what lobbyists are all about. We need a flatter, fair tax system that levels the playing field for everyone, that encourages innovation and growth, and stops taxing investment and productivity. Last year saw the 100th anniversary of the United States Federal Income Tax Code. Hardly something to celebrate. Just go back down a trip on memory lane. In 1913, the top tax bracket in the United States, this is how the tax code was sold, it was going to be a 7% tax rate, and the tax code was 400 pages long. 100 years later, the top tax rate bracket has now ballooned to nearly 40%. That excludes state and local taxes. Excuse me, and the tax code today is over 74,000 pages long. And that doesn't include the rules and the regs. I just returned from speaking at the Reagan Ranch Center in California. I had the privilege to speak to a wonderful group of young conservative women. When Ronald Reagan came into office in 1980, the top tax rate was, hold on to your seats, 70%. Sound like France? Not working so well for them. It didn't work so well for the United States either. But by the time Ronald Reagan left office, our top tax rate dropped from 70% down to 28%. He also secured a 25% across-the-board reduction in income taxes for all Americans in every tax bracket, and he simplified the tax code from 16 brackets down to 2. In addition to cutting taxes, he also reduced spending. He reduced regulations, and he maintained a strong, That's what a long airplane ride will do for you. Sorry. and he maintained a strong U.S. dollar. That's the winning formula for strong economic growth, no matter how you cut it. The result was 92 consecutive months of economic growth, the longest peacetime expansion in American history. And as we saw from Reagan's example, what drives innovation ultimately and growth is a free market enterprise environment that fosters it. Today, too many of our policies and institutions are on the opposite end of free market spectrum. One example in the news recently, coming from the financial services sector, is this: the Export-Import Bank. It doesn't sound terribly sexy, but it overwhelmingly subsidizes the most politically connected corporations in the world. Last year, a handful of Fortune 500 companies received more than half of the bank's financing. Nobody would care if this was a private bank, but this is a government subsidy. It amounts to cronyism that's financed by tax dollars and puts American small businesses at a competitive disadvantage. Do you see what I mean when I say that government is lifting up the big at the expense of the small, enabling the rich at the expense of the poor? That's not what government is supposed to do. It's time to let the free market work and allow the Export-Import Bank to expire. We can and we must advance opportunity for all Americans without giving special handouts to the select few. After 6 years of Barack Obama's presidency, it's no wonder that the American people feel this is a government for government, not a government for people. And I believe that President Obama's lasting legacy will be that the American people saw what a lawless presidency looks like, what big government overreach looks like, and the American people are going to say, nah, I think I'll take a rain check. President Obama set out to make government cool again, and he did just the opposite. The principles that make America an exceptional nation are too valuable to throw by the wayside. These principles are what will allow America to shine as the enduring beacon of freedom and liberty around the world. The Tea Party awakened the country to the values that we hold dear and that have made us the greatest nation in the world. The Tea Party embodies the revolutionary American spirit that rises up in each of us when our freedoms and our rights are being taken away. It's this spirit that built the nation from the bottom and up. It didn't build us from the top down. America hasn't been preserved by officials here in Washington, D.C. As much as we would like to see it, it isn't. It's been preserved by the men and the women who rose to the challenge and made the nation great. The Norman Borlaugs of the world, the Martin Luther King Jr.'s of the world, and the Elie Wiesels. From George Washington's ragtag army, who crossed the Delaware fearlessly in a blizzard, to the pioneers who crossed our continent in covered wagons to settle the American West, to the freedom-seeking immigrants who cross oceans to claim the promise of America's ideals. That's what keeps us rich and strong. It was the faith and spirit of our citizens, along with an opportunity for a better life, that built the country and made it great. Freedom and opportunity, they aren't political, they're not Republican, and they're not Democrat. They're American values. But if we don't stand up to defend these ideals, then who will? In the last few years, it was the Tea Party, the squeaky little voice of the Tea Party that said, I will, I'll stand up, I'll defend these great enshrined American values. They've been the last line of defense to stand in the way of an ever-expanding government that taxes us too much, that regulates us too much, that spends too much, and is trying to extinguish one liberty of the American people after another. The Tea Party will never be content to let the principles of American greatness slip away. And with 2 more years of President Obama's pen and phone yet to come, contend for them we must. I thank you, and God bless you, and God bless the United States. You want any questions? Yeah. Happy to do it. Do you want me to sit down or stand up?
You can sit down. We have time for a couple of questions. Let me maybe kick things off. Since you're not going to be around, maybe we can get to this. Let me put this in policy terms. Assuming the elections go the way people are talking about, you maintain the House, maybe gain the Senate. There will be this battle that comes up all the time with the Republicans and Democrats too. Do we go sort of small ball and get a few things done to show we can get some things done? Or do they go after some big ideas and do something like the Exim Bank or a pipeline or some issue like that? What would your advice be to the leadership? Because I'm sure you're giving it privately. What would your advice to the leadership be of how to manage that, and how would the Tea Party react to those kind of situations?
That's a great question. If everyone heard the question, it was fundamentally this. If the Republicans have both the House and the Senate this year, what is it that Republicans in Congress should do from a policy standpoint? Should they go small ball or should they go big ball? Well, I've only had one lever in my life. It's either on or off. You either go bold or you don't go at all. And when I came to Congress, I decided to take the dice and roll them and give it everything I had, because I had been a mom at home. I have 5 biological kids. We were privileged to raise 23 great foster kids in our home. When I was a mom around the kitchen table, listening to the radio or watching TV, looking at what was going on in faraway D.C., my opinion was this: what's wrong with these people? Don't they know how we live? Don't they understand what it's like to raise a family? We had our own little struggling small business. Don't they know what it's like for us? We just want to create jobs. We just want to grow. We just want to live. We just want a better life like our parents and grandparents did. So I say now and always, it isn't about D.C. It isn't about politicians. It's about finally getting your act together and listening to the American people and recognizing that the world isn't stagnant. Things are changing. We've got to do what we can so that the United States maintains its position as the economic powerhouse of the world. Because when we are the economic powerhouse of the world, then we can also be the military powerhouse of the world. The world is a safer place and better off when America is strong on both of those levels, economically and militarily. And what's phenomenal about this great American experiment in liberty is that it's all rests upon maximum liberty for the individual. What country does that? Only us. Only America does that. Lifts up the greatest amount of liberty for the individual, and shazam, you have the greatest country in the world that's also the powerhouse. You don't do that with small ball ideas. You do that with big ball ideas, like beginning with the tax code. You change it now, immediately. And you either go with a flat tax or you go with a national consumption tax. You figure out which one. I'll lead the debate. You want somebody to lead the debate? I'll lead the debate. Lead the debate and do it. Because guess what, folks? This isn't working. America's foreign policy isn't working. Literally thousands of innocent people across the world are getting killed, including women and children who were buried alive in August by the Islamic State. You see, there are consequences when we are not strong. And that's why I say we don't have time to play around. Now is the time to reclaim greatness, and you don't do it by dribs and drabs. You do it by bold moves. Do you have compromise to get there? Yes, you do. Not your values, not your principles, but you get there.
Good, thank you. Okay, we have a microphone. Please use the microphone.
Hi, Madam Congresswoman Bachmann. I just want to say what a hero you are to the silent majority, the Christian coalition, or just mainstream America. And my question is, I just got back from Southern California, which, as you know, is run by the Democratic Party. And between that and the SEIU and the undocumented immigrants, I just want to know if those of you in Congress realize that I hope you do not, if you pass that is caught, according to Walter Moore, who's a candidate for mayor in Los Angeles, said that Southern California does look like a third world dump, and that's what it's becoming. And hope you, those of you in Congress, realize that if you pass immigration reform, that's what this America will head towards, unfortunately. I just want to know what you have to say about that.
Well, thank you for your question. I think no human being ever would be considered a dump. That would never happen. All human beings have worth and all human beings have value. When it comes to the issue of immigration, I think the most cynical move was made by the President of the United States. When the President of the United States announced publicly that, yes, he was going to, by himself, unilaterally grant amnesty to potentially millions of people illegally here in the United States, presumably some of them could be terrorists that are in the United States who illegally have come across our southern border. That's one of our greatest fears. We don't know, but that's one of our greatest fears today. He could be granting millions of work permits, effective amnesty, but he's going to wait until after the election, just like he's going to do with not publishing how much Obamacare premiums are going to go up until after the election. Let me say this about immigration. I spent 4 days on the southern border. I've looked at this issue and studied it a lot. I thought I knew a lot about this issue until I went to America's southern border. I drove from the mouth of the Rio Grande at Boca Chica all the way to Laredo. And what I learned was this. It was shocking. The Border Patrol doesn't stop anyone from coming into the United States. And it's not their fault. It's the politicians' fault. Any foreign national who wants to come across our southern border comes in. They don't all get to stay necessarily, but they definitely get to come in. America is the most generous nation in the world when it comes to immigration. We allow in legally over 1 million people from across the world every year, legally. If you took every other country of the world and you took the number of people they allow in through immigration and you added up every other country of the world, every country of the world together doesn't equal what the United States allows in immigration in 1 year. And we're not the most populated nation in the world. We are an amazingly generous country, and immigration is good for the United States. We're a nation of immigrants. That doesn't include the number of illegal immigrants who come into the United States every year. Illegal immigration is estimated between an additional 1 to 2 million per year. That's an enormous amount of people. We've had great waves of immigration into the United States, but then we've also hit the pause button so we had time to assimilate. We may be at that point now. Calvin Coolidge did that in the 1920s. He hit the pause button, and we had a period of time where we dealt with assimilation. What is very different now from previous waves of immigration is today we have open borders combined with a welfare state. We didn't have that prior to 1965. That has changed our equation. So you can't talk about immigration without talking about America's current welfare state, because those are two issues that come together.
Yes, Leah Schwarting from Talk Radio News. What I wanted to ask is, I know that a little bit ago you were talking about introducing legislation to help ban people who have Western passports from entering America who had fought with the Islamic State. I was wondering if you'd talk a bit about the latest on that.
Thank you. That's a great question. I just returned from the Middle East, and it is very concerning what is going on. And I confirmed when I was in Europe with our FBI and our Department of Homeland Security a scenario that I find quite concerning. And it's one that I think it would offend the average American person. I come from a state, just by way of background, I come from Minnesota, a state with a tragic nexus to terrorism. We have the only convicted terrorists from 9/11. We have we've had over 50 leave Minnesota to join al-Shabaab, an affiliate of al-Qaeda. They've gone and strapped suicide vests onto themselves, and they've killed themselves fighting for al-Shabaab. We've had 4 cases of foreign terrorism financing. We've also had over 20 Minnesotans leave Minnesota to join and fight on behalf of the Islamic State. The first 2 Americans who were killed fighting for the Islamic State were from Minnesota. We've recently had 3 young women, 19-year-old girls from St. Paul, Minnesota, go to join the Islamic State. We have a tragic nexus to terrorism. And so as I saw the up-tempo rise of the Islamic State, I sit also on the House Intelligence Committee. We deal with the classified secrets of the nation and also with terrorism. I asked for a private classified meeting with the FBI earlier this summer, and I asked our FBI, are there any Minnesotans that have left to fight with the Islamic State? And they told me, yes, there are 2. At that time it was classified, now the whole world knows. They said there are 2 that we are watching. And I said, now presumably if they don't blow themselves up or if they aren't killed fighting for the Islamic State, would they be allowed to return to America if they choose to? And they said, yes, they would, because they're Americans and they have an American passport. Now these are terrorists. These are terrorists who have taken up arms against the United States. And they would be allowed free passage to return to the United States of America. There isn't a citizen that I've spoken to that has thought that that's a good idea. I just had that confirmed again within the last 2 weeks by our FBI and Homeland Security that that is how they read the law. I've read the law. It is United States Code Section 349A. As I read the law, I believe that our government would not be required to allow them to come back into the United States. But I want to make it absolutely clear. So my legislation would add another subsection that would say if an individual who is an American citizen with a U.S. passport is either affiliated with or a member of a foreign terrorist organization, U.S. designated, then the government would have the right to pull their passport and begin the process of denaturalization, stripping them of their American citizenship. In other words, they would have full due process rights, but they also wouldn't have the right to return to the United States because presumably they have battlefield experience, they have relationships with other terrorists, and potentially a plan for terrorist acts here in the United States. We know the up-tempo of the Islamic State. We know what they have stated. They've stated unequivocally by their leader, Baghdadi, in January. He made this quote. He said, we will be in direct contact with you soon, meaning the United States. He said, we are with you. We are watching you. We are with you. Just recently, again now, in the last month or so, he made another comment to the United States along the same lines, that they intend to have activity here in the United States. No one thought they would be able to get into Baghdad. Today, mortars are going into western Baghdad, and there are Islamic State cells in Baghdad, and the question is, will Baghdad fall? I think that when a madman speaks, you listen. We need to take this threat from the Islamic State extremely seriously and recognize that we could see violent activity here in this nation as well. And that's why on every level we need to secure our borders. I am sorry to say, I don't believe that our government is fully securing our borders today. In fact, I know they aren't. Not on the southern border through illegal immigration, but certainly not from legal immigration. When an American citizen who becomes a terrorist, in my mind, they do not have a right to come and upset the safety and security of the American people. The American people deserve to have the right to feel safe in their homes and safe in their communities. And that's what my legislation is doing. And we have members of Congress who are coming on that legislation. I think it should be fast-tracked. I think when we come back into Washington, D.C., the legislation has a companion by Senator Ted Cruz in the Senate. I think that should be fast-tracked because we need to stop terrorists from coming into the United States. Yes?
Is there anyone over the side I didn't mean to ignore you? Okay.
From the internet? Okay.
We have one from the web, which is addressing campaign finance issues and the fact that the Beltway seems to have so much control over who wins or loses because of the national developments in campaign financing. They propose having all donations restricted to and spending within the district from which the candidate is running. Would you care to comment?
Well, that's an interesting concept. I've never heard of that before. Okay, so if just for the benefit of the camera, the question from the internet from an anonymous individual was all the power for who gets to be elected seems to come from Washington, D.C., because so much of the money comes from lobbyists and organizations here in Washington. And the suggestion was, how about if the only money that could be spent on a race would come from money, I assume from individuals who live in the district? right? Was that your understanding? Okay, from individuals who live in the district, because anybody could go and open up a post office box or a bank account and, defeat the purpose. So that's the question. I've never heard of that idea before, but I do know in Minnesota, let me tell you how, one thing that worked pretty well for us, it may be counterintuitive, but I believe that it is ridiculous the amount of money we're spending on these elections. It's gone into the realm of the bizarre and absurd, and even for Washington, D. standards. Because if you look at the presidential last time, about $1 billion was spent on either side. I was told recently that we may be looking in 2016 at about $2 billion being spent on either side to elect a president of the United States. Now, why would that be? The reason why is because whoever becomes president holds the key to the world's largest ATM machine. And the people who are giving the money to elect that president want access to that ATM machine. And from my remarks, I mentioned Solyndra. That's exactly what it was. An individual organization who given money to elect Barack Obama president of the United States, and lo and behold, they get a loan of hundreds of millions of dollars, and shazam, it all goes up in smoke. Oh, too bad. It's just the taxpayers' money. It happens over and over again. In Minnesota, this is what we did. Now, maybe this is too Pollyanna, but what we did in Minnesota is we have limits on what you can spend on an election, actual limits. When I ran for the state senate for the very first time, I think our limit was something like $50,000. To me, as a young mom and a kitchen table homemaker, I thought $50,000 was the moon and the stars. I thought, how would I ever raise that kind of money? Today, I have the distinction of being the member of Congress who's raised more money for a House seat than any other member of Congress. I did that because I was always Nancy Pelosi's top target to defeat. I was highly motivated. I didn't want her to win. I wanted to win. And so I raised the money. People were very generous, and I raised over $13 million in a 2-year election cycle. That's crazy money. That's crazy that any candidate should have to raise that kind of money. So I think the question is a great one, because money is buying influence rather than real people going to the polls. So one would be limits, like caps on how much could be spent. The other idea that I have heard in California, these may be with local elections, there was a limit as to, or there's a booklet that was sent to every person's house. And on the booklet was a list of each of the candidates by their name with their photo, and then it had basic questions and basic answers to certain issues. So people would get that in the mail. They'd have a side-by-side comparison of the candidates, and people would go and vote. Seems like a fairly rational idea. There's things that we can do, but what we are doing now isn't working. It's leading to a game of bigger and better, and we're at the point of bizarre and absurd. One thing I love about the Heritage Foundation is this is a wellspring of thought and ideas. Don't we need more of that in our politics? We need more ideas. Whose idea will win rather than whose crummy 20-second soundbite on TV is going to win? That's what we need to have more of, and there's a better way to do it. So great question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today.
Very good.